The story isn't told by the picture, it's told by their music. Or rather, it can be. This is a trend I rarely see in Hollywood anymore. Most large-scale movies rarely use music to tell a story. Choice of song can really make scenes and films really stand out. I mean, look at Baby Driver, one of the most underrated action comedy films of the past decade. Not to say most directors don't use music in an effective way. Rather, it doesn't seem to be at the forefront or used to tell the story or even impact the characters. So when a movie comes along that manages to capture this in a unique way, I absolutely love it. And that's exactly what Django Unchained was able to do. This is easily my favorite Tarantino film, owed in part to the fun story, amazing writing, but especially the choice in music. Tarantino consistently uses music to tell the story that many times you don't even need to hear what the characters are saying. And I don't mean that certain songs are just good for a specific scene, but rather different styles, instruments, and genres are used in different acts of the film. Acts 1, 2, and 3 all use completely different kinds of music that at first sound familiar, but the more you look at this movie, are all specifically meant to be different. Until at one point, one of the most climactic scenes in the movie, Tarantino uses music as an influential factor into changing the trajectory of the story. Today, I want to discuss how he does these things. Instead of discussing one song at a time, I'm going to discuss the 3 different acts of the movie and how they each use different songs with different meanings, aspects, and vibes to tell a story with an eventual emphasis on the climactic scene of Christoph Waltz's decision to, of course, break bad.
I couldn't resist.
When it comes to the first act of the movie chooses to tell stories starting with songs that are more heartfelt, emotional, and very old school. They really try to encapsulate the feel of the Old West and the horrors of slavery. They have a very spaghetti western feel with a combination of soul and country for the enslaved Africans. Songs like Freedom, which plays when we get the Django and Broomhilda flashback,
I am looking for freedom.
Or even songs like the actual Django theme or La Corsa definitely fit this vibe. With the latter two actually being used in the original 1966 Django movie, which was a spaghetti western, by the way. The only song that doesn't really fit this vibe is Lo Chamivano King, but that's because it's trying to distinguish Dr. King's character from the rest, which is actually a brilliant choice.
His name was King, he had a horse.
However, the song I really want to discuss here is The Braying Mule. Learning about it, it's actually a borrowed piece from an older 1970 western, Two Mules for Sister Sarah, which again just supports the style this first act is going for. But what makes it feel different than these other songs is that it is an instrumental song with no lyrics, making it feel like a track made for the movie. A great pick. Anyway, onto the song itself. It plays in the scene where Django enters the town after being bought by Schultz. It perfectly encapsulates Django's character at this point of the story. He's in the West, on his way to higher status, with him riding into town on a horse, but it really has this weird and janky country tone to it, setting the scene in a way. It matches this judgmental attitude of the townsfolk against Django, our braying mule. The old school country tone eventually begins to transition when we move into Act 2, with no song encapsulating that better than I Got a Name. Sure, on a simple level, it signifies Django's change as he's now a free man and thus got a name. But listen to the style of it compared to the other songs from before.
Moving me down the highway, rolling me down the highway.
It's more upbeat, inspirational, adventurous, but more importantly, modern. I don't know, maybe this is a stretch, but it kind of feels like Django here is ahead of his times. As a freed black man who is now a bounty hunter, that's pretty crazy. I mean, it was actually the only song I knew going into this movie, as it was recent. Not that 1973 is very recent, but more than these other country songs. But even with that aside, it feels like a very transitionary song as we get into Act 2 through a montage that whisks Django and Schultz into the main adventure they are going to have, into Candyland. After I Got a Name, we kind of get another montage western song in Il Giorno dell'Ira, which I learned is an Italian song based off an Italian movie called Day of Anger, which, get this, is about a scruffy underdog who becomes the pupil of a famed gunman. Interesting. But other than that, I think it's a rather interesting choice because its style is very reminiscent of a mix of classical and western, which is where the story is about to be heading. It foreshadows the direction of a clash of fancy classical with rough western, which is exactly what happens when the duo have to go undercover to find Broomhilda, from none other than evil Leonardo DiCaprio. This is one of my favorite roles of his because it's just so despicable, but I think one of the most interesting layers to his character is his garbage attempt to be fancy and sophisticated in this rough Western world. And that middle portion of the movie begins to hit us with various bangers after bangers of these classical style songs. From Ancora Qui, to the original Sister Sarah's theme, to the incredible transitionary one of Nicaragua. This is probably my favorite song of the movie, and it's simply because it feels so different. It's awkward, uneasy, yet brutal, playing in one of, if not the most horrifying scene in the movie, where the dogs devour a slave. It's not very Western-like, rather more like this dreamy, fancy song. I mean, Django even imagines his wife. It really shows our heroes really don't know what they're about to get into. But obviously, as I mentioned before, this whole act just continues on with these classical songs that feel more like cop-outs of others, like Candy himself. And after the heroes are found out and we start to end Act 2, we lead into arguably the most famous scene in the movie, the brutal shootout and death of Schultz. And I love what really triggers his spiral is the music. If that doesn't show you how important music is in this movie, I don't know what will. But what really makes this piece of music really stand out though, is that it is the first time the characters react to it as it's actually diegetic. Now what does diegetic mean? It's essentially when the music is heard by the people in the world of the movie. Throughout the movie before this, every song was non-diegetic, which means that it was only ever heard by the audience. But this time, the characters hear this classical piece of Für Elise or Bagatelle 25 by Beethoven on a hauntingly beautiful harp. And of course, the character to really react to this is Dr. King Schultz. At this point in the movie, Schultz feels completely insulted by Candy. Not even because he really discovered his ruse, but this gradual buildup was because of how much he hated his character. To Schultz, Candy was a stain to the sophisticated and non-American person he was. Candy was American, but admiring and pretending to be civilized, fancy, and European. From his choice of naming his slaves after literary characters, to claiming he's French but being embarrassed he can't speak it, and of course his pretending sense of style and music. Which of course brings us back to the scene where of course Schultz asks,
"Could you please stop playing Beethoven?"
Bro is triggered. He's thinking of how much of a fraud Candy is, and it angers him that he's playing music from his side of the world, from his childhood, trying to be just like him, a civilized man. Which of course becomes an ironic statement as Schultz eventually shoots and kills him, but here we are. All these deep-seating resentments and subtext of the scene come bubbling up to the surface, all because of the use of music with this harp, with it even being the culmination of Act 2 and the classical portion of the movie. The third act of the movie has a very dramatic shift. The plot really slows down and gives time for Django's character to think on his own and how much he's developed as a character. Which of course is where our first song comes in, Too Old to Die Young. It's back to our old Western song as that is the environment Django has to re-enter. But after he escapes, it's back to heroic again and then to classical when he says goodbye to Schultz with the song Un Momento. What I'm trying to say is that the music is trying to clue us into the person Django is becoming. Someone who grew up in the Old West, with slavery being a large part of his life, before he grew into someone more sophisticated and real with the help of Schultz. Someone who could identify these fakers like Candy. The last part of the movie really cements this. First, it comes with Django's revenge on the rest of the Candy folks, where he in a way ridicules them with the use of their own song, Bye Oh Bye. Like Candy from before, they're using these classical songs and even making their own slaves sing them to show their class and that they're better than the rest of the West. So of course, Django absolutely cooks them for it, as he's the one who has truly embraced this combination of Western and classical. And the song at the end, Trinity Totoli, shows this better than any song in the movie. It feels like a Western song, but also slightly different, adopting classical elements. It feels like someone who's embraced growth and adapted to the society in his own way. The beauty here is that this song really stands out. It doesn't feel like a typical Western with its triumphant tone and whistling. I love it, and to me it really concludes this movie and Django's journey.
He's the top of the West.
The music in Django Unchained is so special to me, and there's a reason it sticks with me all these years later. It shows the filmmaker using songs and genre switches to show the undergoing change in our protagonist as he adapts to the world. From starting the movie off with typical Western music, to transitioning to sophisticated classical, which becomes something of a front, before the final act has the songs be more reflecting of someone who's changed and embraced both his Western and classical environments. Thanks for watching, everybody. What do y'all think of Django Unchained and its use of music? Are there any other movies that also have this beautiful use of music? Please let me know. Please like, comment, and subscribe. Thank you, and have a good day. Bye.